Good evening, everyone. My name is Maggie, and on behalf of Book Soup, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us for our virtual event this evening with Zachary Sergi, Chase Baxter, and Fola Goke-Pariola on the topic of queer YA writers on creating diverse and queer characters. We're so excited and grateful that our bookstore can continue to bring authors and their works to our community during this time. We'll be hosting more virtual events in the near future, and you can learn about them on our website, booksoup.com, as well as our social media at BookSoup. Our next event is tomorrow, September 10th at 6 p.m. with Achi Obejas, in conversation with Luis Rodriguez, discussing Boomerang, Poetry, Poesia. Support our bookstore and our authors and purchase a copy of tonight's featured book. Just click on the green purchase button that reads Major Detours directly below the viewer screen. The link will redirect you to our website where you can continue your checkout process. We're also selling digital audiobooks and ebooks through Libro FM and Kobo for those who are interested. If you'd like to ask a question during the event, please use the Ask a Question box at the bottom of the screen and type it in. Please do not use the sidebar chat to ask a question. So a little more about our presenters. Queer writer Zachary Sergi grew up on the Lower East Side of Manhattan and studied creative writing at Regis High School and the University of Pennsylvania. He's a television and fiction writer currently living in Los Angeles, where he writes his interactive novels and lives with his husband. Zachary is the author of a new interactive series, hardcover YA novel called Major Detours, and he's writing exclusive material for Patreon. Chase Baxter is a queer TV writer of the bold type and photographer from Tucson, Arizona, and is currently based in Los Angeles. Fola is a queer Nigerian-American writer who was born and raised in the Deep South, in the Deep South in Georgia, and recently wrote both seasons of the forthcoming Paper Girls adaptation on the Amazon Prime. Without further ado, I'm going to turn the camera over to Zachary, Chase, and Fola. Thank you so much.
Awesome, thank you. And welcome everyone. I'm so happy to have you. We're gonna be talking about this guy here, Major Detours. So yeah, Chase, are you gonna kick us off, I think?
Yeah, we're gonna jump in here. So Major Detours is a little bit different. This is a choices novel. How does that work? What does that mean? And what makes it different from other interactive novels that we may have played with in our youth?
Yeah, that is the question I think that most people ask, so I'm glad you started there. So Major Detours is interactive, but first and foremost, we designed it to be read like a novel. So what does that even mean? Whenever I wrote a question into the book, the goal was, does this pose something interesting about the character development, about a relationship, about philosophy? If that ends up branching the plot, that is great, and oftentimes it does, but that is not the primary goal of providing a choice. And I know you mentioned some of the books. Everyone thinks choose your own adventure when they hear interactive, which I didn't grow up reading those, but I did grow up reading the Goosebumps, Reader Beware, You Choose the Scare line, which were patterned very much so after Choose Your Own Adventure. And the only reason we don't call it Choose Your Own Adventure is because, and I always garble that, Choose Your Own Adventure, is because that's the name of the series. So the name of the genre is interactive fiction, and the name of the style that we've created here is called the Choices novel. So there are kind of three cornerstones that we thought about when writing this novel that make it different from what has come before. So the first thing is that choices always lead you forward. So every time you make a choice, it's not like in a Choose Your Own Adventure where, you would they call it bushy. So you make a choice and it leads you on a very short story and you jump to the beginning and then there's another one. So the plot branches kind of look like a bush. This is much more, you make a choice and the plot will branch for a bit and then you'll get back to the spine of the novel. So it's much more like reading a novel in that sense. And then the alternate endings kind of branch when you get to the end. The second thing is that we have a handy, and I'll see if I can even show you, in the back of the novel, we have this handy guide, which you can sort of see there, where you get to literally keep track of your choices if you want. Most people probably just remember them, but if you want, that guide is there for you. And you can use those keywords to know when, for callback. So let's say you are in chapter 4, it might ask you, oh, you made this choice in chapter 1. proceed accordingly. So that's different for a print novel. Also, at the end, you can plug all of your choices into a bunch of personality quizzes that tell you what kind of reader you get sorted, kind of like the Harry Potter sorting hat at the end, or like a horoscope. And then lastly, the books we mentioned before were all mostly middle grade. This is very much so contemporary YA. We're dealing with 18-year-old characters and all the kind of like emotional coming of ages. So no longer a middle grade adventure. We're in full YA adventure mode. So that's the things that make a Choices novel new and different from stuff that's come before it. So my big question for you two is, what was the experience of reading this like? Because obviously I wrote it, but I haven't even gotten to talk to many people who read it. So I'm dying to hear what it was like.
I can go and start with that answer. I had a lot of fun, obviously, reading the book. I hadn't had that much experience with like interactive fiction besides some other amazing digital books that you wrote, Zach. So that, but this was my first kind of hardcover choose your or choices book, and I hadn't really seen any in the bookstores or anything. So this was my first experience. And then you mentioned people remembering their choices, but I definitely did not remember all my choices. So this was like really, really helpful for me. You can kind of see it's in pencil, but that was so helpful for me to kind of like know what I picked and kind of be able to track everything. And so that was fun. It was hard also not to read it all the way through, because I wanted to read it with the choices just to have the full experience, at least the first time. So for me, it was very fun and exciting to make the choices, but it was also kind of hard not to know what did I make the right choice? I'm very indecisive as a person. So it was like, oh, should I have gone back and made a different choice? But I just kind of stuck with whatever my gut told me and kept going. So it was very fun and obviously very engaging experience to kind of choose, where you were headed. So I had a great time doing it. Yeah.
That is excellent. Yeah. For some early readers, I know a lot of people in the beginning would read both and kind of until they got a sense of like what I was doing and how the book was structured, and then started honoring the choices. Because I think it gets a bit confusing if you try to read everything. But I'm so happy to see you actually wrote in it, because that's what we wanted. We wanted people to like pick up a pen and like literally write down in the book. But I think, Chase, you probably, if I know you, you probably just read everything. But
well, I don't know if I did read a version of this like a year ago, yes. And I read everything, which is what my default would be, similar to you, Fola. Like, making a choice was anxiety inducing. I was like, well, what if this isn't the best one? And like, what if this isn't what I want it to mean? And I did this time read it through just choices and not reading everything, and kind of getting a little bit more of a like personalized story experience, which was honestly really great. And I felt like made the ending feel super satisfying. And like there are like your choices affect the endings and how the characters end up and who they are. And the like personality quiz at the end is like a fun little prize of like, it's almost like Myers-Briggs, like where it was this like reflection of who you are and like strengths and weaknesses. And I feel like a lot of people are going to really like that.
Yeah, so Myers-Briggs was actually kind of the template for how we figured out. So like there's statistics kind of that every time you make a choice, it, as you'll see in the back, kind of like takes a statistic back and forth. And I think Myers-Briggs operates on like a matrix of 16, and we're only dealing with 4 here. So it's a simplified Myers-Briggs, but that's, yeah, and then it leads you to kind of your like reader horoscope. So I'm very happy to hear that. And I should also say that anxiety about whether to make the right or wrong choice, you'll probably also have found in this, there is no right or wrong choice. There are, you're kind of always weighing what's best for this character and making choices on an axis, right? So like maybe you go in the plot direction you think is right, but you sacrifice a relationship. Or you prioritize a relationship, but you lose out on a plot branch, right? So, or you choose what the character would really believe in, but it goes as often as possible. I tried to create choices where, so like, for example, in part 1, you're dealing a lot, and with the tarot, in whether it's possible to predict the future, right? Do we have free will or destiny? And how do you deal with that when you're dealing with a future predicting set of spirituality? And the main character has to make a choice between those things, and their boyfriend believes one thing and their best friend believes another. So are you going to side with your best friend or your boyfriend? Do you believe in free will or agency? So those are the kind of choices that got peppered in here a lot. So, but the good news is there is no wrong. There's no. You don't die. You don't have to start over at any point. You always get an ending, no matter what.
I feel like the hardest was when the hardest with making a choice and being like, it wasn't the right choice was when I made a choice and then it was like, okay, skipped a page, and it was like 6 pages later. I'm like, oh no, what did I miss? What chunk of story did I miss? But I did not go back and read it. I stuck with my choices for sure.
Cool. Did you guys do your sorting at the end? I don't want to put you on the spot. I'm curious if so for readers who don't know, at the end, so this book is structured around the 4 different suits. So it takes place in a world where there is a fictional artist who has a cult following, who created a tarot deck that you're trying to complete, and has organized his following around the 4 suits of the tarot. So there's wands, which is wanderers, cups, which become coupled, pentacles, which becomes repentant, and swords, which becomes sworn. And at the end, based on your most important choices, you get sorted into one of those. So I usually get sorted into coupled. I'm curious where you two end up.
I'm in coupled as well.
Coupled, yeah. So coupled is like ocean, emotion, blue, water, winter. That's like that whole vibe. I'm not surprised to hear that. Jeez.
I am. Wait, do you want to guess, Zach?
If I had to guess, I would guess wanderers, but second.
I actually.
Pentacles.
I'm actually. Is that repentant? Yeah, so I'm repentant.
Yes. Okay,
yeah,
that makes sense. That's like forest, earth, green, witchy, magic. That actually makes total sense. I would assume that your favorite would have been the Queen of Pentacles. That feels very up your alley.
Yep. Any type of queen, honestly.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Should we move on? So yeah, obviously you have some amazing queer characters in Major Detours. Can you tell us a little about the inspirations about them, and then why you wanted to make sure to include these characters in your story?
Yes. Well, as you both know, and I know it's part of your mission as well, just as a queer writer myself, having that representation in there, we were lucky enough to grow up with some of it, but there can always be more. And for me, in the spirit of which I wanted to write, so there's 2 of the main characters, Chase, who is partially inspired by and named after the Chase that is sitting right here. And the cover artist inadvertently nailed the way that he looks. So, but Chase is also a huge part, inspired by me. So it's the character I connect to kind of most deeply. And he has a long-term boyfriend when we enter the novel called Logan, which Logan is my husband's middle name. So that's where that comes from. And so I love that there are so many coming out stories and kind of telling the struggle of what it's like when you come out. But I got to come out when I was really young, and I was 15, 16. So I've always wanted to see stories about what it's like to be gay, living in a world where it's okay to be gay and queer, and it's and you're kind of living your life as a queer person, especially as a young queer person. Because while there are all these messages of it gets better, you still are dealing with dating and relationships, and you're human, and all the difficulty that comes along with that. So I know in my high school and college long-term relationships, that was stuff on top of coming out and being a queer person, I had to deal with breakups and getting together and long distance relationships and all that stuff. So that was a huge part of what I wanted to make sure was in the backbone of the queer story. So without giving any spoiler alerts, Chase and Logan are spending the last 2 weeks before going to college together on separate coasts. So confronting what that is going to do to their relationship is a huge part of their story and a huge part of the choices you make for the character. There's also a character named Cleo who is exploring their gender identity, begins the book identifying with female pronouns, and that evolves over the course of the book. Again, no spoilers, but kind of getting to see that process in real time was important to me, especially because I have people in my life who have gone through transitions like that. And also there's some additional queer stories that I won't talk about because they are part of the choice patterns and pathways and alternate endings. So there's more queer stuff to be had other than what I've just laid out. But those are the big highlights. There's also something that kind of springs to mind when we were talking about this question that when we first came to making decisions about promoting the book, we were looking at different websites we wanted to ask to pair with to do the cover reveal. It was going to be my first ever cover reveal. It was very exciting. And my editor came up with a really cool list of sites. And there's one that we ended up going with called LGBTQ Reads, which is an incredible website run by incredible people. But my first reaction when I saw it was, oh, maybe we shouldn't go with them. I don't want to be pigeonholed as a gay book or a queer book, which was such like a, without me knowing it, internalized homophobia reaction, right? That like I wasn't like standing on a rooftop proud of this super queer book. I was afraid that it would trouble it somehow or not be an asset. And to their credit, my editor, Brittany, and my agent, Lucy, their immediate responses was like, it is such an asset. This is something we want to scream from the rooftops. Like, do not feel that way. It's only going to help the book. And you, and I thank them so much because LGBTQ Reads was the perfect place to do the cover reveal. But it was just surprising that having been out of the closet for so long that, and at this point in my life, I still felt that weird pressure of like, is this too gay? Should I be this gay? Is that okay? So anyway, I want to thank Lucy and Brittany for steering me in the right direction and reminding me what matters. But I'm sure both of you, you've both been in writers' rooms for years now and are on shows that have queer characters. So I'm curious to hear your experience with that and in your own writing. It's kind of an open-ended question, but I know it's something you both grapple with as well. So.
Yeah, sure. I'll jump in. So the only show that I have worked on is The Bold Type, and one of our main characters is queer as well. Two of our main characters are queer, and there are some side characters who are queer. And I feel very lucky, like having been in a room that was populated with other queer voices, because I never felt like representation for these characters was falling on my shoulders, not to mention that one of them is a queer woman, which is an experience that other voices are needed to speak to. And I mean, it's always nice to just write like stories that allow you to reflect on your own experiences, but also like celebrate or understand the differences that other queer people have throughout their own experiences, because there's such a spectrum of experience in our community. And I think, as you were saying, like a lot of it used to kind of be this, a lot of the representation used to be this kind of fraught coming out experience, and we've moved so far past that. And I still think those stories are important, but it's nice to get to be able to talk about like what it means to be a 20-something living in New York and like trying to go to gay bars and realizing you don't have enough gay bars to go to, or just like figuring out that you might want to sleep with more than one person. And yeah, and then I think I'd probably inject a little more of my own stories into my personal writing, probably a little bit just by default, but it's always nice to be opened up to others' experiences.
Very cool.
Yeah. So for the show that I ran a couple seasons of a show called Paper Girls. It's about these 12-year-old girls, 12, 13 years old, and they're time traveling and stuff. So I can't talk too much about what's happening in the show because it hasn't come out yet. But
it is based on an incredible graphic novel comic series by Brian K. Vaughan. So if you're curious, go check that out. But sorry to interrupt.
No, exactly. They're great comic books. So definitely check them out. So I can talk a little bit about what's in the comic books, and like we're obviously adapting that. But there's a lovely kind of queer romance in the comic books and between a couple of the girls, and it's nice because it's kind of a pre-teen, pre-romance kind of storyline that we've gotten to do a little bit of in the show, and that's kind of nice to kind of, because a lot of times queer people are sexualized so much that when you see younger queer stories on TV, people get mad. Parents are, well, how am I going to explain that to my kids? But I'm like, little boys are like, oh, he's going to be a ladies' man when he grows up, and they're talking about their kids like that all the time. One that's queer is sexualized, which it shouldn't be. So it was nice to kind of deal with these characters in Paper Girls, and deal with the kind of like sweet young love that's not insidious, it's not sexual at all. So that was really fun for me to write and kind of doing the story. And then in my own writing, everything I write is queer, which is good because I went early days when Zach was talking about wondering if the book was too gay and stuff like that. When I first started writing in college, I would write stuff like in class that was like straight and white people, because I was like, this is the standard. I was just so ingrained in my head that when I started to write about people that didn't even look like me, and I quickly stopped doing that. And I felt so bad for a 20-year-old Fola who thought that he had to write, what was the norm, less people in my class assume, oh, I'm just writing a queer Black character, because I'm queer and Black. Well, yeah, hell yeah, I am writing a queer Black character because I'm queer and Black. You know what I mean? Like, so we're just trying to write stories that show our truth and show the world as we see it, and that's something that people who aren't as marginalized have been awarded all of their careers. So we're just trying to do the same thing and write the world as we see it. So I think, you know, it's just great to write queer characters like that and kind of keep pushing the envelope.
Fantastic. Another question?
Yeah, we will keep on moving on. So what is the story of like the birth of Major Detours?
Yeah, that's another big one. So I will try to, I won't talk too much about this, but before I wrote Major Detours, I was most known for writing digital interactive novels. They're called Heroes Rise and Verses. And it's funny because I fell in, I don't know, there's no other way to put it, to writing those. I had an early manager and was approached by the founders of Choice of Games looking for writers, and I was 23 at the time. This was 2011, and they were like, "We'll pay you to write an interactive novel about whatever you want." And I was like, "Superheroes," and so it was interesting because I had always grown up making up little RPG games for me and my brother, and I tried writing a choose your own adventure when I was like in 3rd grade. So part of it felt natural to me, even though this was before iPhones really had been popularized. I still had a BlackBerry. RIP. I miss BBM to this day. But so the idea of writing a fully coded novel in a coding language I didn't know how to learn a coding language, to write an interactive novel, to live as an app on a phone I didn't even have yet felt like several leaps of faith. But that's what happens when you're 23. You have the time and the energy and the ability to take risks like that. So I wrote the novel, and it was the most me thing I'd ever written. And much to my surprise, because I believed if anything, my parents would read it and that would be about it. It found this beautiful following, and spawned a career that there have been 8 books in those respective series, and spoiler alert, they're interconnected. So it was because of those novels I was trying to pivot to writing another traditional novel, and my agent Lucy was out with it. It was a supernatural queer horror novel. And during that process, I think not even because of it, but just in having conversations, came across my editor, Brittany, who, she didn't tell me this so much later, but had read and was a big fan of the digital novels. And was, I didn't know how much she had read of them until I thought she was just aware that they existed. But anyway, so she had read them and was curious about how to adapt this new. So what had separated the digital novels from the choose your own adventure and RPG games that came before them was because it was all coded, the choices could be more sophisticated, and there was a system of keeping track of the choices, and it felt older and more mature, and the choices really were meatier. So Brittany, in her intrepid fashion, was, I would love to figure out how to do that for print. Would you be interested? And yet again, I said yes. So I really define myself as a queer interactive writer now, but not what I set out to do. So I'm a big believer. I think it's RuPaul was like, the dream dreams you sometimes. So I always knew I wanted to be a writer, but would never have known, even as a senior in college, that interactive writing would be an option. So Brittany had a couple premises that her team was interested in, and one of them was a road trip with a genre twist. And I had just written a pilot that almost got bought 4 times and never got made, about a cult and about tarot cards. So I kind of had all this research brimming in my head, and so I pitched tarot cards as an idea. And then we began the work of kind of doing a proposal to figure out what this could look like in print if we try to simplify it down. So a lot of the Myers-Briggs stuff and the pacing was inspired by the digital interactive fiction, but done in a way that would make sense. Our number one thing was we wanted new readers who didn't know anything about tarot and who didn't know anything about interactivity to be able to read this flawlessly and not feel overwhelmed at all. And her team ended up buying the proposal. So that was almost 2.5 years ago. So it's been a journey of then writing the book, and here we are today, and it's finally out. So that is the story of how kind of my career got pushed in this direction. And I know from personal experience, because we are all friends, for anyone who doesn't know, that you both had very intense ways to get to your successful writing career. So I'm sure, I know people always love to hear about that. So, and I would personally like for you to tell those stories. So, Fola, you want to start?
Yeah, sure thing. So I always wanted to be a writer ever since I was a kid. I always wrote like short stories and poems and stuff like that. My dad actually had this little magazine called Homefront that he had at Georgia Southern that he would run some of my short stories in when I was like a young kid. And then by the time I was going to college, I knew I wanted to write. I also was very much into TV and film, but I still didn't think of screenwriting as an option. Really, I didn't know anyone who was a screenwriter. Hollywood might as well have been Mars to me. I would say I just did not know how I would even get there. So I went to school at University of North Carolina, and I was studying journalism. Was maybe going to try to do editorial or something, but then I saw this poster in one of the hallways at school that said Hollywood internship, and I was like, oh, I can go from here to there. That's a real place, and it just kind of was like a light bulb moment. And then I changed my major that day. I started studying screenwriting, video production, film theory, and all that stuff. I did a really terrible student television show that some of my friends have seen. It was called General College, and it was like the 25th and 26th season of the show, and it was like a soap opera, and I acted in it as well, which was very bad.
Would like to see this. Need to see this someday.
Yeah, I'll show it to you one day. Yeah, but I had like, even though I didn't know what I was doing at the time, I had a little writer's room. I was editing, directing, and I was like, okay, this is what I want to do in the real world. So then I came out here after college, and I did the better part of a decade. I was doing internships and temp work, receptionist work, executive assistant work. So I kind of just, half the battle is being a TV writer and being in this business is just sticking around, honestly, sticking in the industry and keeping on, even if you're not getting paid much, you're working long hours. So my earlier jobs where I was like doing a receptionist gigs and stuff like that, it was a lot easier to write because it was very easy. I write at work all the time, but then later in my career, I got a lot more executive assistant coordinator roles that were very high volume, very stressful. I got a lot of gray hairs in my beard. I don't know if you can see them now, but they weren't there.
I have them as well.
They were not there before those jobs. But I worked on the development side for a while, and so I got a lot of good feedback and a lot of good stuff that I learned being in pitch meetings and working with a lot of producers and writers and all that stuff. But essentially, I worked on that side for a while always maintaining the goal of wanting to be a TV writer, wanting to get into writing. And then I was able to kind of segue my experience and my connections at the studios that I worked at to eventually get staffed in a room. So that happened about 2 years ago. And before that, I got a manager. I had a script in Outfest and stuff like that. So that year, things were kind of building up finally to, come to fruition. And then I was able to get staffed on Paper Girls, which was an amazing experience. I love the show so much. I can't wait for it to come out eventually. But we wrote a couple seasons of that. So you guys should be seeing that soon, probably next year. But yeah, it was just kind of grinding and staying in the business, kind of working on the development side for a while and just never giving up, even though I wanted to plenty of times, and keeping on writing. Even if you write very slowly, you just kind of keep going. If you write a script a year, it's kind of like, as long as you stick around, keep writing, you'll end up, getting where you need to go.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like no two writers have the same path to where they end up, and often don't end up where they expect to. But the only thing we all end up having in common is perseverance and just it's grinding and sticking with it. It's the only way. I know you were in a similar situation, right?
Yes, I grew up wanting to work in entertainment, but didn't really think that it was a career option when I was in college. Got into an investment banking track, and then very last second moved out to LA. Ended up at a talent agency, worked as an assistant in a couple different departments. Ended up in TV Lit, and was reading scripts all the time. And I was like, I will, if I end up an agent or a producer and don't try to do what my boss's clients are doing, I'll always regret it. And so I started writing a lot and then moved over onto the creative side of things and working as a showrunner's assistant, a writer's assistant. And then I was a writer's assistant on The Bold Type and then got bumped up to writer from there. And yeah, it is riding that wave of will I ever work again? Well, I can at least keep on writing something for myself, which is a luxury that other jobs in the entertainment industry don't always offer, because you can't act your way out of something unless you write something for yourself to act in, and we can at least write our way into a new job.
Absolutely. Amen.
Yeah. So obviously in Major Detours, it's this really fun choices novel. And like, what are some of your favorite interactive features that you got to invent for this novel?
Yeah. So there's some cool stuff. It's so great getting to talk about it because I think people are going to have a lot of preconceived notions about what this novel might be going in. That there are lots of fun surprises in store. So I won't get too deep into it, but one of my favorite things is, as we talked about there, the novel is structured around the 4 parts of the minor arcana in the tarot deck, and I kind of made each part have a different theme. So in Wanderers, which is wands, you're dealing a lot in the desert and faith and spirituality, and that's where a lot of these questions of agency versus destiny come into play. And then in the second part, we're in the ocean, and cups and coupled and relationships, and you also get into haunting of it all, right? So you get to answer a lot of questions about whether you believe mediums or haunting or spirits are real. And then in the third part, we get out to the forest for a pentacles kind of magic vibe, and making a lot of decisions about the line between where science ends and magic potentially begins. And then in the last part, we're at Sworn, the swords like up on the mountaintop, literally in Mammoth Mountain. And a lot of the choice themes are about whether divination and what's the line between religion and cult, and a charismatic leader and a prophetic voice. So there are a lot of really needy kind of fun themes we get to build choices around because of the tarot. And like I said before, I made it so that there's no right answer, right? And I also try to leave a lot of these questions open-ended so that it'll encourage the reader to think about these things, and I'm not going to provide the answer on what happened. It's up to the reader to decide. My other favorite thing is, and this was part of the invention of the structure, is what I call information modes. We'll probably come up with a better name for it as the time goes on. But at a certain point, you ask one of the main characters what their intention and their purpose for this whole road trip and discovering the tarot decks. It belonged to her beloved grandmother who passed away. So in addition to that motivation, what is she really hoping to gain from this? Which is a very fundamental question in the tarot, right? If you're going on a journey, what is your intention and what are you hoping to gain? And when you answer that question, the plot's barely branched. It's a very half a page scene, but that intention keeps resetting. So, and it allowed me to create 2 kind of separate branches as you go through the story. So that ultimately lead to 2 alternate endings. So this seemingly benign choice about your intentions ends up majorly affecting the route you're on and the set of information you receive and your set of experiences. And I think that's really cool because to me, I'm a big believer in setting intentions, and that your intention often rules the outcome, which is a big, among many other Oprah-ism. So that's another huge part. And it also makes it cool because you can go back to the beginning and set a different intention and have a very different experience in terms of the information and the experiences that are doled out to you. The other big thing that I loved, which I'm curious if you guys, how you experienced it. I wanted one part of the book to be like an old school choose your own adventure feel, like maze. So the kind of when you're in that haunted house and you have to go through the codex, you get the literal you have to decode the doors to decide which direction to go in. How did you guys find that experience? Because that was one of my favorite things to write.
Stressful, but in a great, in a way where you're in it. I know we've both talked about how anxious having to make any decision can be, and I don't know, it feels like there's real stakes on the line, and I know there's not a right or wrong, but I also know that the plot really does change based on which doors that you're moving through in this maze, and it's stressful to be am I going to get my goal here?
Yes,
yeah, I thought. Okay.
I was just gonna say that's the only place in the entire novel where there's a success or a non-success outcome, but as you know, the non-success factors in a different way too. So you're never failing. It's just what is that not success? Yeah, exactly. What were you gonna say, Fola?
I had a similar experience. I found it kind of stressful, but in a good way. And obviously, when I read stuff, I obviously think a lot of it how it would look on screen or as far as TV or movies. And it felt like a very good like third act kind of like set piecey thing because everything had been really fun so far. And we got kind of different settings, and this was a very fun, like visual, exciting, and like escape room almost esque type thing. So I thought it was a really good thing for the final couple chapters of the book to kind of really elevate everything. And I thought it was really like cinematic.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm very thrilled to hear that. I should also pop in and say we'll probably go on for another 5-10 minutes or so. So if anyone has questions, I think there's a little ask a question button at the bottom. You can pop in. We'd be thrilled to answer any of your questions. So take a second to do that. So in terms of the interactivity, we kind of, it was interesting for me having written digitally for so long where while it is complex, there's a lot of ways to hide, right? So the reader only sees based on the coding what I want them to see as the writer. And in this situation, I quickly began realizing, oh, there's nowhere to hide. It's all going to be on the page. Readers can read every page if they want. They can see. So it was an interesting challenge to make it really feel like the choices matter without, obviously, there's a limitation on length, right? When you write digitally, I could write 150,000 words and it didn't matter for the bottom line. But here there was a real restriction to how much I could write for financial production cost reasons. So to find interactive, it really challenged me to find choices that felt like they mattered, but also that wouldn't affect the plot in a huge way that would be unmanageable for the production scale. So it was oddly, while it's less words, much more difficult to write for print because there was nowhere to hide in a beautiful way. So so those are, in terms of interactivity, those are the kind of like the big things. And I know people ask all the time. So we kind of, if you read it twice, you probably get the full experience in terms of every choice has two options. So you can literally make one set of choices and then go back and read it again and make another set. And it'll be two fairly different experiences with the same plot backbone. And then beyond there, it's all about like the infinite combinations of the different combinations of choices you make. So even though you're not reading new content, the story kind of takes its own shape based on how you're building it bit by bit. So that's part of what I love most about interactivity is that with any genre of writing, it becomes the audience's at a certain point. But with interactive, it's really the reader's story once it leaves my desk. So I'm hoping people get into that aspect as well.
I will say, as someone who has very vocally said that interactivity is not the platform of like reading that I would like to read stories on, I found it super rewarding and like it was really engaging, and I think that you guys nailed it. So great job.
I know Chase has read a lot of my stuff and a lot of my interactive stuff. And I like when he reads because I know he actually doesn't like interactivity as a genre. So it's actually a wonderful benchmark to pass because if you like it, I feel like we've done our job. So, and I'm also curious as we wind down into questions, if you guys have any advice for writers out there, but especially young and any queer writers, I think. Making sure that we leave the door open for every writer that comes behind us is like a priority for all of us. So I can start off with my little piece, which is just that to never, and this is a lesson I learned working in Hollywood too, to never write what you think is going to sell. I think your instinct when you're an unknown writer is like, well, I have to write something that someone's going to buy. And you immediately fall into this trap of writing stuff that's not authentic. Whereas the reality is, you want to write the stuff that doesn't exist in the world. So of course it has to be producible in some sense, but the more specific it is to you and your experience and your interests, the better chance you'll have of actually selling it, I think. And also, if you don't have fun writing it, I don't think anyone's going to have fun reading it. So that's something I remind myself all the time. If I'm writing something and I'm boring myself, I immediately stop and figure out something else because no one's going to have fun reading something if the writer isn't having fun as well. So to me, it's always like, just have fun and do what you think is cool, and the rest will work itself out if it's supposed to. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's super good advice. I think if you, keep writing no matter what, just persevere. A lot of times people will tell you, if you want to write, if you want to make it in this industry, you have to be writing every single day for several hours a day. And if you can, great, but that's not true. I hate when people give that specific piece of, I hear it all the time, like it's not true. I did not do that. There would be weeks where I didn't write because I wasn't in the mood to write, or I didn't feel inspired, or I was very busy. But as long as you keep going back to your projects, it might take you a year to get through a couple of drafts of a script, or it might take you a couple of months. But the biggest sample that I have, like going around town, that gets me most of my meetings and jobs, I wrote in like a month and a half. And the other stuff I wrote over years and years, and they're not going anywhere. You know what I mean? So it really just kind of go with your gut with what you're writing. If, like Zach said, if you're having fun writing it, it's probably a good sign. If you always get to a scene in one of your scripts and you're like, oh, I hate this scene, then delete it. You know, if you don't like writing that scene, it's probably not good, or it's probably not working in the story. And then also always be open-minded and not precious when you're listening to notes. You know what I mean? Like if you get the same note more than once, make sure you're listening. You don't have to take every single note. Not every single note that you get is going to be good, but just always listen with an open mind, because notes are great. They're just trying to make your script better, basically. So always listen to them with an open mind. And for queer writers specifically, like I was talking about before, just kind of always write your truth. Never think that you have to make things less queer or less diverse or less whatever. Write your truth, because what makes you unique as a writer is your own experience. You're the only person who can write your story. So just do that, because that's what's going to make you stand out for sure.
I love that. Yeah.
I mean, you guys both give great advice, so I echo kind of everything that you guys said. I think like two things that have been helpful for me are one of my friends told me, like, and I'm sure some celebrity said this, and that it's like some famous quote, but it's that like every artist makes bad art. And like I think I would get so down on myself when I didn't like my writing, or like if I just written something good and then the next project like wasn't working, I felt like everything was ending. And it's really freeing to just remember that like everyone makes bad art, and you just have to be making stuff. And the second thing connected to that is patience. And I think like it's about, if you're trying to build a career, like it's a long-term game and you're trying to build a foundation. And I mean, Zach, like just what you were saying earlier, that like a pilot you had written forever ago that didn't end up like getting like sold helped inspire this book, and like was on your table ready to go. And I think it's really important to remember that it's going to take time for you to find your people that are also going to advocate for you. And like not everything is subjective. Everyone has individual taste, and like in this job, you are somewhat reliant on people outside of your control. And sometimes it just takes a little bit to find the people that are the right advocates.
I always say it's kind of like becoming a writer and finding the people who will make your writing a reality is like dating. It's like sometimes you're just going on these dates and it's just not the right match, and it doesn't work 100% of the time until finally you find someone who gets you and it clicks. And no amount of hard work or grit or endurance like makes that happen other than kind of serendipity. I mean, just having writing and staying at it is the key. But anytime I try to explain what it's like being a writer, especially an aspiring writer, it's like, oh, it's like dating. Like you just go on a million dates until you end up in a relationship, if you're lucky. Okay, before we take audience questions, which feel free to add some more in there. We'll have time for them. I want to know what some of your favorite YA books are personally, and I have some answers too if you need a second. But do you have any, Fola?
I do. I like YA a lot. I read a ton of queer YA novels. It's kind of like what makes me just feel good and relaxed and happy. So I just looked over my bookshelf to figure out which ones were my favorite. I love Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda, which was Love, Simon, the movie. Yes. That book's great. Dante and Aristotle Discover the Secrets of the Universe is beautiful. They're making a movie out of that as well. Perks of Being a Wallflower is a classic.
Yep.
And then there's a book called I'll Give You the Sun. Also, those four are probably some of my favorite YA books for sure. Yeah.
Very cool. Chase, do you have some?
Yeah, I honestly don't read a ton of YA, but I think I have a few that I can pull from. I don't know if this counts. Red Rising series.
I think so. Close enough anyway. Yeah.
I absolutely love that series. And I think that's probably like the one that sticks out the most for me. I don't know. Can we jump into TV shows too?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
I really, really love The Wilds on Amazon.
Yes.
They just crushed it, and the stories are told so well, and they get all of the immense like power of teenage emotion and all the like. There's so many different stories that are told. Absolutely loved it.
Yes, I also love the Wild. Just firing on all cylinders. It was soapy and juicy, but also like very representative and a lot of different types of characters, many we haven't seen before. I loved that show. My favorite YA novel of all time, it's probably We Were Liars. I don't know if either of you read it by E. Lockhart. But I also love Darius the Great Is Not Okay is another huge one for me. And The Hazelwood also. And I would be remiss to say our good friend Jessica Goodman's They Wish They Were Us and They'll Never Catch Us are also fantastic. I also love K-Pop Confidential. I'm a huge pop music nerd and very into K-pop. So Stephen Lee's book is A+. And I should also say, if we're going to veer into TV, nothing sums up my entire soul as a writer quite like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So whenever any discussion of YA comes up, that is like, I know there's some fraught stuff that was going on behind the scenes that we didn't know about when we were younger, but to me, that the combination of drama and heart and humor and action is where I want to live all the time. So, okay, cool. Should we try to take some audience questions?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's see what we have here. Okay, I'll go for the first question, which says, what are your thoughts on the emerging trend of choose your own adventure on Netflix and other streaming platforms?
Okay, yeah, I can start. I know there's my first thought is that there's not enough of it. I think it would be great if they made some more. I think everyone's still figuring out what's possible in that realm. I think also producing interactive content can get incredibly expensive. Trust me, I know even as a writer, to be economical is tough. I think as a result of that, a lot of this stuff that has come out specifically on Netflix, I know Bandersnatch was lovely. A lot of it can end up, when you write interactive, it's very easy to get caught up in the choices as a gimmick. And I think the very first thing you have to remember is that you're telling a story, right? So character, plot, and then the choices have to feel derivative of those things as opposed to having a choice for the sake, because you have the ability to. I am very excited for there to be the first kind of like fully fledged mainstream interactive television show. I think the question is just going to be how to produce it in an economical way. In my humble opinion, I think we figured out how to do it with Major Detours, but there's dozens of interactive schools out there, especially with Choice of Games, my original publisher. Lots of different authors do it a different way. I have a much more novelistic style, which is not, trust me, I've heard over the years it is not everyone's cup of tea. So yeah, I mean, my opinion on it is that I just want more of it, and I'd like to be making one myself.
This is a somewhat related question, but if you could write an interactive episode of any TV show that's on the air right now, what would it be and why?
Okay. The immediate answer is my favorite show on television, which I also know is Fola's favorite show, and it would terrify me because it's very far away from my own personal writing style. But on Paramount Plus, it is the most current, smartest. I just can't say enough good things about it. And I think actually, it would be so cool. They're so on the pulse that I feel like do an interactive episode very well.
What is it?
The Good Fight on Paramount Plus.
Yeah, it's the Good Wife spinoff. I agree with Zach. I won't shut up about it. It's the best show on TV. It's so smart. And then as you started to say that, I knew you were saying this is your favorite show, but I think if any drama did it, it would be them, because they kind of do so much bizarre things while remaining so elevated that I could actually see them doing it in a universe, and doing it pretty well. And
doing it in a meaningful way that would still be incredibly smart. So I would be terrified to write for that show because it's so smart and it's so current and political and legal. And I mean, but I think like Chase said, the Wilds would also be like to do something like, I know it's elite, but elite, right? Or or else something like soapy as hell, and getting to make choices about the relationships would just be super cool. I'm trying to think if there's any other shows.
I think that's a good, what you're talking about, kind of the soapy show. So I was thinking, I watched Bandersnatch, which was good, but I think for TV and interactive, even from a production standpoint, if it did something that was more grounded and it was about love and relationships, and it wasn't that hard to shoot the different scenes, if they went on a date with so-and-so instead of so-and-so, I think kind of a more grounded kind of like love story could be interesting in an interactive way.
Completely agree. Yeah.
Let's see, more questions. If you three were to go on a road trip, where would you want to go? Well, that'd be fun.
That's a good one. With you two specifically, and this is kind of a selfish answer, I would want to go to Las Vegas. I think we would have a very, very fun time. We could go to the Fruit Loop, which is the circle of gay bars in Las Vegas.
I've never been.
I'm usually not a desert person. I love like coasts a lot more, but there's something very peaceful and like centering and meditative about the drive from Los Angeles to Las Vegas. So that would be my answer.
Not the drive back. The drive back is
never fun. For a lot of reasons. It's just not the right headspace when you're leaving Las Vegas to go back to Los Angeles usually. But what, do you guys have any thoughts?
I would pick like a really long one, like a cross country. Like, obviously we'd stop, for the night several times. But I did that once or twice, like from the East Coast, and it was just, there's no other reason to ever really do it, and it's just to see all the different landscapes. I would just want to see the nature, and so I would just pick something very long, like that we could like see a bunch of different landscapes and nature and stuff like that.
That was one of the things I purposely did with like designing their road trip for tours, right? The beautiful, I mean, I'm a New Yorker at heart, but the beautiful thing about living in California is you get every kind of possible element of nature you want. Right? We have deserts, we have forests, we have mountains, we have oceans. So that kind of like fire, water, earth, air that happens at the Taro played very well for California. I've also never been to like the Pacific Northwest, so like Seattle.
Me either.
My answer was going to be up the California coast into Oregon, Washington. It is Northern California, like Oregon coastline in Washington is the most stunning scenery I've ever seen in my entire life, and it is awesome.
I've never been. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. And Chase is a beautiful photographer, so if you would like a slice, and he takes excellent pictures of nature and all that stuff up north. So I had to his Instagram for a slice of what it actually looks like.
I am going on a mini version of that, but just through like Big Sur, Monterey, Carmel, this coming week.
Features
scouting for us.
Major detours in part 3, so it's a good plug.
That's one of the other things I love so much about the book,
as we like,
is the fact that I thought it was very cinematic that you were going through all the landscapes of California, and again thinking about how it would look on screen. I'm like, that would just look so great, to see all the different landscapes that you see in California.
The TV writer in me creeps into fiction and vice versa in ways that neither probably like, but that is one element. I kind of see things cinematically, so I've been told that my writing can feel that way too. But it's also a road trip, and it was part of the challenge. It's like, well, we don't want them to be we want moments of them bonding in the car or the van, as it would be in this story, but they got to get out and have adventures too. So okay, I think is there one last question before we wrap up?
Yes. So I think they kind of wanted to talk back about something that you talked about earlier with the interactivity of the novel. Like, what does the process look like when you are choosing your own adventure in the book? How do you land on choices and possible endings? It seems a little complicated.
Yes. So that's a good. So I would say the best way to think about it is every time you make a choice, it's like putting a little building block in place. And sometimes you'll see the immediate effects of your choice in the plot or in the relationships. And a lot of times the effects of your choices don't play out until later in the plot. So that's the kind of fun of it, is you never know what you're building as you make these choices. And the choices kind of feel, the goal for me when writing them was, do you get to this choice and do you have to stop and think, right? You have to like get to and you're choosing something, you're always sacrificing something to gain something, or choosing about what you believe about kind of fundamental things in life and relationships. And every time you make a choice, So part of what we talked about is that back matter. So literally every choice is done around each character has statistics tied to them. It's very simple. It's laid out in the back. So like, for example, for Amelia, she can be like as an empress type from the tarot, nurturing or demanding. So a lot of times you'll make a choice that are around her personality stats, and she has strengths and weaknesses. So every time you make a choice, it'll tick one of those statistics back and forth. And then there's kind of rubric in the back to see which one of those strengths and weaknesses you leaned into more in your choice making. And oftentimes those will feel subtle. Like you won't even know that that's what you're choosing because the choice is actually about something else. And then there's also by the end kind of a growth arc. So you can kind of choose how to enhance or maybe solve some of the insecurities that you've seen the character display. I also think one of the interesting things is a lot of choose your own adventures are written in the second person. So do you actually in the story, but in this case I wrote it in the first person, toggling between two different characters. So I've been told by some other people who've read it that it's interesting. Do you read it with you yourself as the reader in mind, funneled through the characters? Are you making choices that you feel honor the characters themselves? I think there's no right or wrong answer to that, and it kind of plays into how you could read the book differently, right? Like you're getting to the head of these characters. Or do you want to play Machiavellian and pit them against each other? There's lots of different experiences you can bring to the choices, I think.
Yeah. Well, I will just say one more time that it was like a joy to read and so much fun to be able to kind of have an effect on the story, and the ending just made it was very much worth it, and everyone should go read it.
Yeah, I agree. Everyone should go read. It's really fun to just take your little pen and kind of be interactive with everything. So it was one of a kind experience for me. So I think it'll be one of a kind for most of the people that kind of will go and buy this. So yeah.
Awesome. And yeah, to my final thought is if you do read and you do get the character outputs at the end, reach out to me on social media. I'm dying to hear what corners you're sorted into and what personality profiles you get and all your reactions. So yeah, get involved. And thank you very much, Book Soup, for having us. This has been such a joy.
Thank you so much. That's a wrap on our presentation. Thank you again to our guests and to everyone who tuned in this evening. We greatly appreciate everyone's time and your support of independent bookstores. Support our bookstore and our writers, please, 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 and purchase a copy of tonight's featured book. Just click on the green purchase button that reads Major Detours directly below the viewer screen. If you'd like regular updates on our upcoming events, make sure to follow us on Crowdcast and subscribe to our newsletter. And now especially, please stay safe, everyone, and have a great evening. Thank you.